The silent strike the morning Earth changed forever began like any other. Children walked to school in Tokyo, traders opened their shops in Mumbai, and night shift workers headed home in New York. Nobody saw the missiles coming because they weren't meant to be seen. The hierarchy had planned this for centuries, studying humanity from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Commander Sarah Chun was reviewing supply reports at Luna base when the first impact registered on their sensors. She thought it was an equipment malfunction at first. The readings showed impossible energy signatures blooming across Earth's surface. Then the second hit came, then the third. By the time she reached the observation deck, 12 mushroom clouds were rising from what used to be humanity's greatest cities. Beijing, London, New York, Moscow, Tokyo, Berlin, Paris, Delhi, Sao Paulo, Cairo, Sydney, and Los Angeles. Gone, not damaged or wounded, but completely erased from existence. The weapons weren't nuclear. They were something far worse. Antimatter warheads that left nothing but glass craters where millions had lived just moments before. The communication channels exploded with panic, grief, and confusion. Sarah stood frozen, watching Earth burn. Below, her family lived in Beijing. Her sister taught kindergarten there. Her parents had just celebrated their 40th anniversary. Now they were atoms scattered in the wind, but Sarah couldn't grieve. Not yet. As the highest-ranking officer, left in the solar system, command automatically transferred to her. The entire Earth Defense Fleet, what remained of it, now looked to her for orders. She had 17 ships, most of them cargo haulers hastily retrofitted with weapons. Against an enemy they couldn't even see. The message came 3 hours after. The attack. It appeared on every surviving screen, in every human language, spoken by a creature that looked like crystallized shadow. The being identified itself as Supreme Orchestrator Vex of the Hierarchy, a coalition of 43 advanced species united in their belief that younger races needed guidance or elimination. Humanity, Vex said, its voice like grinding glass. You have been judged. Your species shows dangerous potential for chaos and destruction. Your emotional volatility threatens galactic stability. This correction was necessary. Surrender now, and your remaining population will be relocated to reservation worlds where you can live under proper supervision. Resist, and we will complete your extinction. The transmission ended. Earth's surviving leadership wanted to surrender. They called Sarah, begging her to accept the terms. 3 billion were already dead. Why risk the rest? Sarah looked at her. Crew. She saw the same thing in their eyes that burned in hers. Not fear, not despair. Something the hierarchy hadn't calculated. Pure, crystallized rage. Send this reply, Sarah said. Earth declines your generous offer. We'll see you in hell. What the hierarchy didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for something like this. Not specifically an alien attack, but extinction-level catastrophe. Hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as a mining operation, was Project Prometheus. It was meant to be humanity's last resort, a weapon so terrible that even its creators had voted to seal it away. Sarah gave the order to activate it. Dr. Marcus Webb, the only surviving member of the original Prometheus team, had been living in exile on Europa for 10 years. They pulled him out of his ice cabin, sober for the first time in months, and put him on a shuttle to the asteroid facility. He looked at the devastation reports during the flight and laughed, not from joy, but from bitter irony. I told them, he muttered. I told them we needed to be ready. They called me paranoid, said I was a warmonger. He looked at Sarah through the video link. Commander, do you know what Prometheus actually is? A weapon system, Sarah replied. Marcus shook his head. It's not a weapon. It's a transformation. We studied every military defeat in human history, Every time we faced extinction and survived, you know what we found? Humans don't win through superior technology or numbers. We win because when pushed to the edge, we become something else. Something our enemies never expect. The Prometheus facility was built inside a hollowed-out asteroid, invisible to any scanning technology. Inside, 300 volunteers had been waiting, training, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were artists, engineers, teachers, farmers, people from every walk of life who shared one qualification. They had all lost everything in previous conflicts and survived. Sarah met them via hologram. 300 faces looked back at her, each one carved by loss, but hardened by determination. These weren't people fighting for glory or conquest. They were fighting because they had nothing left to lose and everything to avenge. The plan was insane. Instead of defending Earth, they would attack. The hierarchy expected humanity to cower, to beg, to slowly die. They didn't expect a species that had just lost 3 billion people to launch an offensive. The Prometheus volunteers would pilot specially designed craft, not ships exactly, but hybrid vessels that merged human consciousness with quantum processors. The pilots wouldn't just fly these craft. They would become them. It was irreversible. Once connected, the human pilot would exist as a fusion of flesh and quantum mechanics, capable of thinking and reacting at light speed, but never able to return to human form. You're asking them to give up their humanity, Sarah's second-in-command. Lieutenant Torres said, "No," Marcus corrected. "We're asking them to become humanity's vengeance." Every volunteer stepped forward. While Prometheus prepared, Sarah organized Earth's remaining forces. She knew they couldn't win a conventional war. The hierarchy had technology centuries ahead of Earth's. But humans had something else, the ability to do the unexpected, to find victory in the impossible. She studied the attack patterns. The 12 missiles had been launched from somewhere in the outer solar system. The hierarchy was still out there, watching, waiting for Earth's surrender. They thought they had broken humanity's spirit with one decisive strike. They were wrong. Sarah implemented Operation Wildfire. Every surviving ship, station, and satellite was retrofitted with a simple but devastating modification. Instead of trying to match the hierarchy's weapons, they would turn their own technology against them. Human hackers had spent years dealing with cyber warfare. Now they would apply those skills to alien systems. The first test came when a hierarchy probe approached Mars. It was a routine surveillance unit, scanning for human military activity. What it found instead was a virus, not a computer virus, but a hybrid of human creativity and quantum mechanics that infected its communication systems. Within seconds, the probe was broadcasting human music, literature, and art directly into the hierarchy's network. That it seemed harmless, even amusing. The hierarchy commanders laughed at humanity's pathetic attempt at resistance. They didn't realize that embedded in that cultural data were fragments of human emotion, raw, unfiltered psychological warfare that no species had ever weaponized. Before Dot, the hierarchy prided itself on logical thinking and emotional suppression. They had never experienced the full spectrum of human feeling, the crushing weight of grief, the burning heat of rage, the desperate hope of the doomed. Now it flooded their networks, their minds, their very consciousness. Reports came in from across the solar system. Hierarchy ships were malfunctioning, their crews unable to focus, overwhelmed by alien emotions they couldn't process or understand. Some ships turned and fled. Others sat motionless, their crews paralyzed by feelings they had no framework to comprehend. But this was just the distraction. While the hierarchy struggled with humanity's emotional assault, the Prometheus volunteers completed their transformation. Sarah watched the process through security feeds. Each volunteer entered a transformation pod, their bodies connected to miles of quantum circuitry. The process took hours, and the screams could be heard through the entire facility. When they emerged, they weren't human anymore, not in any recognizable way. They were living weapons, beings of pure intention and purpose, existing simultaneously in physical and quantum space. They could think at the speed of light, react before actions were taken, and most terrifyingly, they carried within them the concentrated grief and rage of humanity's loss. The hierarchy had fired 12 missiles at Earth. Now humanity would answer, with 300 amalgamations of human will and alien-destroying purpose. The volunteers, now calling themselves the Furies, prepared to launch. Humanity's fury unleashed the Furies launched at dawn, Earth time, though in space such measurements meant nothing. Sarah watched from Luna Base as 300 streaks of impossible light shot toward the outer solar system. They moved like nothing anyone had ever seen, not in straight lines, but in patterns that hurt to observe, folding space around themselves, existing in multiple places simultaneously. The hierarchy detected them immediately. Supreme Orchestrator Vex stood in his command chamber, surrounded by representatives of the 43 Species Coalition. They watched the approaching entities with confusion, turning to alarm. "What are those things?" demanded the Cathari ambassador, his crystalline form flickering with anxiety. "Ships?" suggested another. "No," Vex said slowly, his advanced sensors trying to make sense of the readings. "They're alive, but also not. They're human, but also something else." The first Fury reached the hierarchy's forward fleet near Saturn. The massive dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a planet, opened fire with weapons that could split atoms and tear holes in reality. The Fury, once a teacher named David Kim, who had lost his entire family and soul, simply existed somewhere else when the weapons fired, then appeared inside the lead ship. What happened next was broadcast across the hierarchy's network before they could cut the feed. The Fury didn't attack in any conventional sense. It began to sing, not with voice, but with its entire being, emanating the last lullaby David had sung to his daughter before leaving for work on the day she died. The sound was grief made manifest, loss given form, and it spread through the ship like a virus. The crew of 800 began to weep. These were beings who had evolved beyond emotion, who viewed feelings as primitive weaknesses. Now they experienced the full weight of a father's loss, magnified by quantum mechanics and directed with surgical precision. They didn't just feel it. They became it. Within minutes, the dreadnought was dead in space, its crew catatonic, drowning in emotions they had no evolution to process. The other Furies struck simultaneously across the hierarchy's fleet. Each one carried a different aspect of human experience. Maria Santos, who had been a nurse in São Paulo, brought with her the desperate hope of trying to save lives while the city burned around her. Her Fury form invaded 3 cruisers at once, flooding them with the sensation of holding dying children. While knowing you couldn't save them all, the hierarchy tried to adapt. They shut down communication networks to prevent the emotional contagion from spreading. They activated AI-controlled weapons that couldn't be affected by feelings. They even attempted to retreat to their base at the edge of the solar system. But humans had anticipated this. While the Furies wreaked psychological havoc, Sarah's conventional forces moved into position. They had spent days modifying their weapons with something Marcus called grief rounds, projectiles infused with the quantum signature of human loss. They didn't need to be powerful. They just needed to hit. The battle near Saturn's rings became legend. The hierarchy's fleet, technologically superior in every measurable way, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. Humans rammed ships they couldn't destroy. They broadcast the names of the dead on every frequency. They turned their own deaths into weapons, rigging ships to explode with emotional payloads that left enemy crews weeping uncontrollably. Lieutenant Torres led a squadron of 7 patched-together fighters against a hierarchy battleship. They were outgunned 1,000 to 1. The battleship's commander, a being from a species that had never known family bonds, broadcasted their surrender terms. "You cannot win," it said. "We are superior in every way." Torres responded by transmitting a single image, a photo of his daughter's birthday party, taken 1 week before Buenos Aires was vaporized. Then he accelerated to full speed and rammed the battleship's command bridge. His ship exploded, but not before uploading 10,000 similar images directly into the ship's central computer. The AI tried to process them logically, to understand why humans kept images of moments that no longer existed. It crashed trying to comprehend nostalgia that the hierarchy's formation broke. For the first time in their 1,000-year history of galactic dominance, they experienced rout. Ships fled in every direction, their crews either incapacitated by human emotions or terrified of becoming so dot. But the Furies weren't done. They pursued, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The hierarchy needed to understand that humanity wasn't just another species to be catalogued and controlled. They were something unprecedented, a race that turned their greatest weakness, their emotional intensity, into their greatest weapon. The pursuit led to the hierarchy's command station, a massive structure hidden in the Kuiper Belt. It was here that the decision to attack Earth had been made. It was here that 43 species had voted to exterminate humanity as a threat to galactic order. Now those same species watched in horror as 300 Furies surrounded their station. The hierarchy possessed weapons that could crack moons and shields that could withstand supernovas. None of it mattered. The Furies didn't attack the station's defenses. They attacked its soul, if such a thing could be said to exist. They projected onto the station's hull images of Earth before the attack. Children playing, couples walking hand in hand, scientists making discoveries, artists creating beauty. 3 billion lives reduced to atoms, each one a universe of experience and potential, destroyed dot inside the station, supreme orchestrator. Vex stood before the coalition, watching as his fellow leaders began to crack under the emotional assault. The Zephyrini delegation, a species that communicated through color, turned shades they had no words for. The machine intelligence of the Korathi experienced something like regret for the first time in their digital existence. "Make it stop," one of them pleaded. "We didn't understand. We didn't know they could feel so deeply." Vex wanted to maintain control, to find some logical solution, but he too was drowning. The humans weren't just showing them pain. They were showing them what had been lost, the beauty and potential of every life extinguished. For the first time, the hierarchy understood that they hadn't just killed 3 billion humans. They had destroyed 3 billion unique perspectives, 3 billion different ways of experiencing the universe. Sarah's voice cut through their chaos. Broadcast from Luna Base. "You thought emotion made us weak. You thought feeling made us primitive. But you never understood that our emotions aren't separate from us. They are us. Every human you killed carried within them the capacity for love, joy, creation, and yes, destruction. You awakened something in us that we had tried to forget. We are capable of terrible things when pushed. But unlike you, we know the weight of what we do. We feel it, and that's why we'll win." The hierarchy sued for peace within. The hour, not a conditional surrender or a negotiated settlement, but complete capitulation. They agreed to withdraw from human space, to pay reparations, though no amount could bring back the dead, and most importantly, to spread word throughout the galaxy that humanity was not to be tested again. Asterisk, but Sarah wasn't done. As the hierarchy's fleet prepared to leave, she gave one final order. The Furies would accompany them, not as guards, but as reminders. These 300 humans who had given up their physical forms would travel with the hierarchy, ensuring they never forgot what they had awakened. They would be permanent ambassadors of human grief and human potential. The last transmission from Supreme Orchestrator Vex was simple. We thought we were teaching you a lesson about power. Instead, you taught us one about loss. We will not forget. We cannot forget. Your grief is now part of us forever. Earth began to rebuild, but it was different now. The surviving humans knew what they were capable of, both beautiful and terrible. They had turned their greatest vulnerability into their greatest strength. The galaxy had learned that humans weren't just another species to be conquered or controlled. They were something unique, beings that could transform pain into power, loss into determination, and grief into an unstoppable force. The memorial for the 3 billion dead was simple. A single message broadcast continuously into space. You were loved. You are remembered. You are avenged. And in the void between stars, 300 Furies sailed with the hierarchy's fleet, ensuring that the galaxy would never forget the day they fired 12 missiles at Earth and unleashed humanity's fury. They had expected to fight a species. Instead, they had awakened a force of nature, one that turned emotion itself into a weapon no technology could defend against. Asterisk humanity had lost 3 billion souls. But in their loss, they had gained something else. The fear and respect of a galaxy that now understood that humans didn't just feel emotions. They weaponized them. And that made them the most dangerous species in the known universe.